Hi, this is Make a Geek and I'm Dan. Welcome back to the workshop. It's been a little while since I put together a real video. I've been doing a lot of different things, putting stuff out on Instagram and TikTok and Shorts, but mostly because the garage has been a mess and just getting the big camera out and doing the whole thing has been a bit much. But I figured I would do a little bit of an update on some stuff I've been doing around my car and some just like quality of life improvements that I've created for it. And so here, let's dive right in. So a couple of years ago, well, I guess a year and a half ago now, I bought a 20-year-old MX-5, which is a fantastic car. Very much enjoy owning it. There are a couple of things that I wanted to do because it's an old car. The first one was support having a modern smartphone mount because it wasn't really designed for such things. There aren't very obvious mount points. So what I have done, let's bring you in to have a look at. So this is the original air vent. There are 4 of these in the car, 2 in the central console. And they come right out. They have these little clips that kind of just rotate and clip in place. So this is the original, and someone had already designed a 3D printable replacement for that, which is a fixed thing rather than this kind of movable directional thing. This is a fixed one, but it has this socket that you can then use as a mount point. So this clicks into place in the original location, and it gives you a point from which you can then mount something right between the dash, basically like the central console and the driver's side kind of instrument cluster. There's a little gap that's right next to one of these. So this provides a jumping off point for that. And combined with that, I found this fairly simple design. This is kind of all the pieces of. This is just a gravity feeding. Oh, let's try and get this into. I've only got some of the pieces of this, which I'll explain in a minute. Very good. So the idea of this is that when you put a phone in, it sits on these, and the arms raise up and grip the sides. And this was a fairly simple design. Say 3D printed all these components, but I didn't want it to be 3D printed. I wanted other parts, or at least not all of it, to be 3D printed. So if I... So that gave me an interesting challenge to play with creating those parts in other materials. So here we have the current version of that, including the mount point. Let's bring you in over here to see that. There we go. So, let's say, when you put weight down here, the arms go up. So I took these 3D printed arms and I recreated them in aluminium. So these are just machined aluminium arms that do the same job. And I took this faceplate that was plastic, and I machined it out of wood here on the CNC machine. And that just means it's a slightly nicer material to use, slightly more robust. Now these pieces are still 3D printed, but I 3D printed them on the resin printer instead of the FDM printer. Now I don't know if I can bring this in and you can see the difference. So on the FDM printer you can very much see the layer lines. It looks very 3D printed. It's a sort of a style, whereas these come out as a very nice matte black plastic. They could almost be cast. A little bit higher quality looking, I think. So that fits nicely. And then the back panel is still just the 3D printed one. It's out of sight. And then I designed this weird arm, which is, in my mind, the perfect use for 3D printing, which is, this is a weird connection point between this, where this fits physically in the car, And if I put this in here, it sits in like that. So where this sits in the car, this arm dodges the trim of the car and places this little pad just up against a piece of the console to provide support, and the whole thing ends up holding the phone mount at just the right orientation to be seen from the car. So that is a success. Now, what I will say is that this is the FDM 3D printed version of this, which is fine, but again, looks 3D printed, and compared to the original, it's not quite the right look. Like, it's pretty good, but it's not quite right. So what I have got going on, which is actually being painted right now. Now, this is not quite as chromy as that, but that does feel like it's drying. Could do with another coat, I think. But this is a resin printed, again, version of this thing. So when this is dried, I'll take that off and we'll see what that looks like. But I'm hoping that that will fit a little bit more into the set with the others in the car. So that's quality of life number one. New holder for the phone so that I can do GPS navigation and all that kind of stuff. Quality of life number two is speakers. So in the original MX-5, the only speakers are in the doors. So there's one down here. There's also this thing up here that looks like it's a speaker, but it isn't in almost all models. If you bought the upgraded audio model with like the special Bose sound system, then there was a tweeter here, but every other car has the speaker grill, but behind here, absolutely nothing. So I wanted to upgrade that. I've upgraded the head unit to something more modern, and so I wanted to put speakers behind me. There are models of the MX-5 that came with a windbreak behind the two seats. I guess the default was a windbreak, and there was again an upgrade to that windbreak that put two speakers in it. Variations of that whole thing exist. My car actually doesn't have that windbreak, it has a style bar instead, but I wanted to adopt the rear speaker idea, and so I've built a custom mount for those speakers to exist between the two seats. Run all new wiring to the new head unit to support those rear speakers. And the last detail I wanted to do was add some mesh covers for those speakers. So this is another little 3D printed job that I have going on, which is just these two rings to clamp a piece of mesh between them. They have a little bit of a ridge line to try and create like a slight curvature. It's not really enough to do anything in particular. But the main thing is that this will clamp some mesh between them and then will bolt in place. So I'm going to make the second one of these now. The first one is already in place, and then we'll go put all of this stuff back in the car. So the first step for creating this little speaker mesh cover is getting the mesh to size. So one of the things I did off camera was I just ran a quick CNC job to make this little puck. There's a little bit of a doming to this, because I had it in my mind that I would press this in and the perfect curvature would be impressed into the mesh. In reality, that doesn't happen at all. The mesh isn't dense enough to take such a subtle curvature, but when pressed into this form, it does create a crease line that just marks the diameter that I need. So what we're going to do right here is we'll just quickly cut ourselves a chunk of this. So we have this, and I'm just going to put that there. I'm just going to stick this in a clamp, and we'll Let's do that, yeah. Just gonna clamp this in place. Just squidge that in. And there we go. So again, it's not a perfect process, and it's probably just as easy to have marked it with a pen, but it gives me this like ridge line to cut to, where I know this is the size of mesh that I want, and it does put a little bit of a flex on this. So now it's going to cut round that ridge. Okay, so I should probably apologise for some of the audio in this so far. I have been experimenting with putting a mic on top of the camera, and it picks up a lot of background from the motors. I thought I'd get away with it. Mostly have, but this section was pretty awful. So, what are we doing here? We've got our 3D printed rings. I've sanded them a little bit because I'm going to paint them. I'm just checking the fit on that mesh circle that I've cut out. And yeah, the idea is that this just pretty easily sandwiches the mesh between these two circles. There are some holes around these rings. 4 of them are designed for me to rivet through. 2 of them are designed to be bolted through against the speaker mount itself. So hopefully this is just a case of spray the components the color I want, which I'm going to color match to the car, and then rivet it all together and bolt it onto the car. That's all there is to it. And here we just unmasking the pre-painted air vent mount that we talked about earlier. Always a bit satisfying just to pull off the masking tape for something like this. And it looks pretty good. It's a shame the chrome is not as chromy, but it's better than nothing, I think. And then you can see the whole mount together. Here we go. I've painted off camera because it's not very exciting to see spray paint. I just sort of did a primer layer and then color layer, and now I'm just drilling through. So the drill here is helping just kind of mess up the mesh where it interfaces with these holes, which also means hopefully these rivets will get a good grip on kind of a semicircle of mesh as well as the plastic. It certainly seems to work well enough. I actually quite like the look that this comes out with. This actually worked really well. And there you go, all done. I just had some temporary bolts in those holes to help things whilst I was riveting, but let's go fit it to the car. Look at that, perfect fit. See, not as chromy, but I think the fit looks good and holds the phone in exactly the right place for me. Ta-da! I didn't film me fitting it because it's really fiddly to do this stuff in the car at awkward angles. But here we go. A couple of speakers mounted between the seats. Just barely clears the little hatch. I could probably adjust this. I think I might at some point make this so that it just holds them ever so slightly higher up, just to make that clearance a bit better. But you know, where I have this seat position is almost all the way back, so it just fits just perfectly. I know the angling is going to make some people cringe to the left and right channel separation, all that kind of stuff, but the main objective was just to get like another set of speakers to make the volume a little bit easier to distribute. At some point when the weather is a bit nicer, I will have to try it with the top down and see whether it makes a notable difference when there's noise of air rushing. But for now, you know, I'm pretty pleased. I quite like the look of them. I ran the wires kind of round the trim. It comes under the carpet, and there's a channel beneath this plastic, this 3D printed piece that routes the wires into each speaker housing. Yeah, I'm probably going to put the 3D printed models on Thingiverse and various other model sharing sites. And yeah, so far pretty happy with how these little quality of life upgrades are. I think it's time for me to take the car for a spin. Thanks for watching. See you next time.